I knew the execution was coming the second I saw the HR rep's face. That tight smile, eyes darting around like she was afraid I might snap. She led me into one of those sterile conference rooms they use when they want to make you feel small. Gray walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, table that could double as a morgue slab. On the other side sat the new CTO, Jake Morrison, legs crossed like he'd just won the lottery. He didn't even try to hide that smirk. 17 years I'd given TechFlow solutions. Late nights debugging their disasters while he was still learning how to spell algorithm. Missed Thanksgivings, skipped 4th of July barbecues, patching up crises he couldn't even pronounce. And this is how it ends. No handshake. No, we'll miss you. Just a manila folder sliding across that polished table in HR's monotone voice. We'll need your badge, your laptop, and the company mug. The mug. A ceramic thing with a faded TechFlow logo from 2007, back when our office was a rented warehouse in Austin with a leaky roof and one working space heater. They treated it like I'd been smuggling state secrets in my desk drawer. I stared at it for a moment, seeing my own reflection warped in the glossy black surface. Then I handed it over, slow and deliberate. Morrison's smirk deepened, like taking my coffee mug was some symbolic victory. I bit down on the laugh building in my chest. If only he knew. They thought stripping me of a ceramic mug would be the highlight of their petty power trip. What they didn't notice, what they'd never bothered to remember, was the tiny digital key I still held. Not something you could yank out of my hands in a fluorescent-lit room. I kept my face blank, shoulders small, the perfect picture of someone being quietly escorted out. Morrison leaned back in his chair, already talking over me to HR about rebuilding her little project in a week. My little project. The client portal that 75,000 businesses logged into every morning. The same system he couldn't access without a sticky note full of passwords taped to his monitor. I gathered my things in silence. No scene, no tears, no bitter speeches for the gallery of curious co-workers pretending to refill their water bottles in the hallway. The mug, the laptop, the badge. They went into HR's cardboard box like trophies from a game they thought they'd won. But there was one thing that didn't go in that box. The knowledge that the beating heart of their entire operation, that portal serving 75,000 daily users, was living on a domain that didn't belong to them. Back in 2007, when budgets were tighter than a pickle jar, the founders had begged me to get the portal running by Monday. No legal team, no procurement department, just me, a company credit card, and enough Red Bull to kill a horse. I'd registered the domain myself. Kept renewing it year after year, waiting for someone to ask about transferring ownership. No one ever did. Walking out that day, Morrison's voice echoed in my head. We'll have it rebuilt in a week. The countdown had started. He just didn't know it yet. The drive home to my Cedar Park apartment felt longer than usual, but my mind wasn't on traffic anyway. It was back in that cramped warehouse where this whole mess started. No ergonomic chairs, no kombucha on tap, no meditation rooms. Just mismatched folding tables, a dozen beat-up Dell laptops, and 6 of us trying to build something out of pizza boxes and pure stubbornness. I could still hear the founder's voice from that night, 2 a.m. Austin thunderstorm rattling our one good window. Him pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. Mitchell, we need the client portal live by Monday, he'd said, shooting me that looked like I could bend space and time. No, we can't hire an agency. No, we can't wait. Just make it happen. When he hung up, the room went quiet except for our overworked server humming like a dying refrigerator. The truth was, we didn't have a budget for extras like domain registrations or SSL certificates. We were broke. Not watching our expenses broke, but someone brought peanut butter crackers for lunch because it's all we got broke. So I pulled out my personal Visa and bought the domain myself. $12.99 for a 1-year registration. Such a small thing at the time, just a quick fix to keep us moving. We needed a front door for clients to log in, and I gave us one. Nobody said, "Thanks for covering that, Mitchell." Nobody promised to reimburse me. I didn't ask. I just kept renewing it every October when GoDaddy sent the reminder email. For a while, I'd forward the receipt to our founder, David. He'd always respond with a thumbs up emoji or, "Got it, thanks." After a few years he stopped replying and eventually I stopped sending them. The $12.99 went on autopilot with my personal card, and nobody in management gave it a second thought. Funny thing about small details. They're invisible until they're not. Until they're the only thing standing between your business and total collapse. It wasn't just the domain registration either. In those scrappy early days, I'd stitched together the entire framework that ran their client operations. Password resets, billing notifications, order tracking, support tickets. All of it routed through that portal. Without the domain, it wasn't just a matter of pointing DNS somewhere else. You'd have to rebuild the entire backbone from scratch, then convince 75,000 businesses to update their bookmarks, trust the new site, and hope nothing broke in the migration. Good luck doing that in a week, Jake. I'd never mentioned it out loud, never used it as leverage. Why would I? Back then we were family. All cramped in that warehouse together, breathing the same dusty air, pulling the same insane hours. You don't weaponize trust when you believe in the mission. But now that family had kicked me out because Morrison wanted to mark his territory. The memory of his smug grin replayed in my head. That little flicker of satisfaction when I handed over the mug. He thought that was ownership. His ownership over everything I'd built. I knew better. Real ownership wasn't about holding a coffee mug. It was about control. And that control was still quietly sitting in my GoDaddy account. I moved through my final day like I was cataloging evidence. Each drawer I emptied, each file I handed over, done with surgical precision. No slamming, no dramatic speeches, no cardboard box held like a surrender flag. If they wanted a scene, they'd have to write it themselves. A few co-workers, the ones who remembered the warehouse days, hovered near my cubicle pretending to check their phones. Danny from DevOps leaned in and whispered, "You should say something. Make them regret this." I gave him a small smile, the kind that says, "I've got this handled," and shook my head. Words didn't carry weight in this place anymore. Actions would. From somewhere behind me, through HR's glass fishbowl office, I caught Morrison's voice. Loud and performative, like he was still auditioning for leadership. "We'll rebuild her little side project in a week," he was saying, as if 17 years of infrastructure could be crammed into a sprint cycle. HR laughed, that brittle sound people make when they're trying to please the person who signs their checks. I packed my remaining personal items. Family photos, my lucky pen, the small succulent I'd somehow kept alive, into my messenger bag. Everything else they could keep. The documentation, the process flows, those neat stacks of post-its with shortcuts only I understood. I didn't realize until that moment how much of what I'd built lived in my head, and how little was written down in a way they could actually use. No farewell email. No mass message to the all-staff list filled with exciting new chapter nonsense. I wasn't going to thank them for escorting me out of a place I'd helped save from bankruptcy 3 different times. There would be no cryptic LinkedIn post about new adventures ahead. My silence would speak louder than any carefully crafted goodbye. I slung the bag over my shoulder and felt something rectangular in the bottom pocket. My lawyer's business card. Heavy cardstock, clean typography, no unnecessary flourishes. I'd had it for years, mostly for lease reviews and tax prep. Now it was going to serve a very different purpose. The security guard assigned to escort me. Poor guy looked more embarrassed than I felt. Walked a polite half-step behind me to the elevator. In the mirrored doors, I saw a version of myself they wouldn't recognize a week from now. Calm, collected, almost serene. Not because I was at peace, but because I knew something they didn't. When the doors opened on the lobby, I stepped out without looking back. Outside, the November air hit sharp and clean, carrying the scent of food trucks from the plaza across the street. I walked toward the parking garage, footsteps echoing, thinking about Morrison's joke. Her little side project. He thought he'd inherited it. Thought it was his now, to rebuild or tear apart as he pleased. What he didn't realize was that some things can't be inherited without permission. And permission wasn't something I was planning to give. I reached my Honda Civic, slid behind the wheel and started the engine. As I pulled out of the garage, I felt that tension drain from my shoulders, replaced by something steadier, colder. The countdown had started. They just didn't know it yet. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the fuse I'd lit without striking a match had burned clean through. Somewhere in TechFlow's gleaming glass tower on South Lamar, servers pinged, systems booted up, and 75,000 businesses across America hit login like they had every morning for years. Only this time, instead of dashboards and data, they got a white screen with black text. Simple and unapologetic. Asterisk license to use this domain expired upon termination of my employment. Please contact my attorney to negotiate new terms. Asterisk. That was it. No corporate logos, no animations to soften the blow. Just those words and my lawyer's direct phone number. I sat at my kitchen table in Cedar Park, mug of coffee in hand. Not the company mug, my mug, the one I'd bought myself, and watched the world burn from the comfort of my flannel pajamas. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, my phone buzzed every few seconds with fresh alerts. Customer service wait times climbing past an hour. Business owners openly tweeting about mysterious downtime. Panicked LinkedIn posts from account managers asking if anyone else was having trouble accessing the portal. In my mind, I could picture the escalation perfectly. First, a low hum of confusion. Maybe the servers are just down for maintenance. Give it a few minutes. Then the calls start trickling in from East Coast businesses who run tight schedules. Within 10 minutes, that trickle becomes a flood. The customer service reps, most of whom I'd trained personally, would be juggling 3 headsets at once, apologizing without any actual answers. By the half-hour mark, the problem would move up the food chain. Team leads pulling emergency huddles. IT pinging each other in frantic Slack messages. And when they realized it wasn't a glitch, wasn't a firewall issue, wasn't a server crash, when they finally saw the message for themselves, the panic would crystallize into something heavier. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread. The funny thing was, I didn't feel giddy. No manic rush, no petty satisfaction. Just a calm, steady hum of control. They'd fired me thinking they'd stripped me of my value. Today they'd learn just how wrong they were. And they'd learn it while explaining to 75,000 angry clients why their business had ground to a halt. Around 8:15, a breaking news alert popped up on my phone. Major Austin tech firm experiences massive client outage. Cause unknown. I chuckled under my breath. The cause unknown part wouldn't last long. All it would take was one sharp-eyed client to read the message and realize this wasn't technical. It was contractual. By 8:30, the ripple effect had likely hit CEO David Chen's office. He'd start with IT, who'd tell him the servers were fine but the domain itself was the problem. Then legal, who'd pull up the registration records and find my name. Not TechFlow's, in bold letters. At that point, I imagined the silence in their conference room would be thick enough to cut. On my end, I refreshed the newsfeed, set my phone face down, and went to rinse my mug. I'd waited 17 years for this company to notice the thread holding everything together. Now the thread was gone, and they were discovering what it had been holding up. By 9:02, my phone lit up with a number I recognized instantly. David Chen's direct line. I let it ring twice, just long enough to make him sweat, then answered with a neutral tone you use for telemarketers. "Mitchell," he said, voice dipped in honey so thick I could hear it clogging his words. "How are you doing this morning? I wanted to touch base, make sure there aren't any misunderstandings." I could practically hear the frantic shuffling of papers on his desk, muffled voices in the background feeding him lines. He launched into a rehearsed offer. A small consulting fee if I'd be willing to restore service today. Said it like he was doing me a favor, like I might not realize the nuclear weapon in my hands. "I think you should call my attorney," I said evenly. "Oh, that's not necessary." "It is." Cut him off. "Have a good day." I hung up before he could try another spoonful of sugar. I pictured him staring at the phone, blinking, then spinning around in his leather chair to bark orders at whoever was unlucky enough to be standing nearby. Probably Morrison, who I imagined was already vibrating with fury. In some corner of the building, Jake would be storming into the IT department by now, slamming his hand on a desk and demanding, "Just switch the damn domain. Point the site somewhere else." I knew exactly how that conversation would go because I'd lived it years ago when we acquired a smaller competitor. IT would explain in careful, reluctant voices that switching domains wasn't like flipping a light switch. It meant migrating terabytes of client data, reconfiguring security protocols, rewriting authentication systems, then testing it all before unleashing it on 75,000 paying customers. Even if they started immediately, it would take weeks. And that was if nothing went wrong. Something always goes wrong. So they'd try the other route, bypass me, crack into the registrar account somehow. But that account wasn't tied to any company email or payment method. It was mine, secured with two-factor authentication on a device only I held. And even if they somehow hacked it, the legal minefield they'd step into would make the current outage look like a coffee spill. By noon, the gloves came off. My inbox pinged with an email so stuffed with legal jargon it could have doubled as a doorstop. Subject line: Cease and desist. Unauthorized control of company property. Pages of bluster from their corporate law firm, dripping with words like malicious, extortion, and damages in excess of. They accused me of interfering with business operations, withholding critical infrastructure, deliberately causing reputational harm. It read less like a legal letter and more like a tantrum run through spell check. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney with a 2-word note. Your move. An hour later, his response went out. 1 page. 3 attachments. No threats, no emotion, just facts. The original domain registration from 2007, billed to my personal address, paid with my personal Visa. Current registration details showing my name as owner and administrative contact. A neat column of renewal receipts, year after year, each one charged to me. 3 pages that said more than their 10-page tantrum ever could. The domain wasn't theirs. Had never been theirs. By mid-afternoon, the story slipped out of their control. It always does. You can manage internal chaos for a while, but once it hits social media, you're done. At 2:17 p.m., TechCrunch posted an article with a headline, Austin SaaS company locks out 75K clients over employment dispute. The lead image was a full screenshot of my login page message in crisp resolution. No blurring, no speculation, just my words in black and white. Within minutes, the piece was shared across Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. Comments rolled in like a tide. Asterisk. This is what happens when you treat your people like trash. Asterisk. Asterisk. 75,000 clients. That's a PR nightmare waiting to happen. Asterisk. Asterisk. Bet the CEO is having a fun afternoon. Asterisk. I could imagine TechFlow's internal Slack channels melting under frantic messages from their PR team. Crisis meetings being called. David trying to steer the conversation. Morrison posturing, legal hissing about pending negotiations. Then came the tweets from clients. Not vague, anyone else having issues. Posts. These were angry, direct callouts tagging TechFlow's official account and major news outlets. Asterisk, at TechFlow Solutions you just cost us a day's revenue. Should we send the bill to your CEO or your CTO? At WSJ at Bloomberg Tech asterisk. Asterisk, at TechFlow Solutions locked us out of our portal with zero warning. Our customers are calling non-stop. Explain yourselves. Asterisk. Once that genie escapes the bottle, there's no putting it back. Reporters smell blood when they see big numbers and bigger egos. Nothing says, press this story, like a high-profile service outage with personal vendetta written all over it. The call came at 6:42 p.m. Long after I figured they'd retreated into damage control mode. Blocked number, but the voice was unmistakable. Margaret Holloway, board chair. With that measured tone you only get from someone who spent decades talking to shareholders without ever raising their voice. Mitchell, she said. Not a question, not a pleasantry. Just my name, delivered with something the CEO and CTO had been incapable of all day. Respect. I'm calling on behalf of the board. We'd like to discuss terms. Not threats. Not condescension. Terms. I let silence stretch between us, just long enough for them to feel the imbalance. "I'm listening," I said finally. "We need to restore service as soon as possible. If you'll outline what you need to make that happen." "This isn't about a payout," I cut in. "This is about making things right." Another pause. Chairs creaking faintly on their end. The shuffle of people leaning closer to a speakerphone. "First," I said, "you're going to reinstate Amanda Torres and Kevin Walsh, both terminated without cause in the past 6 months. Full back pay, no probation periods. They were excellent at their jobs, and you tossed them aside because they didn't fit someone's ego." I could hear a sharp intake of breath, but no one interrupted. "Second, you'll issue a public statement acknowledging their contributions and admitting their terminations were mistakes." The board chair hesitated for just a fraction. "And third," I said, letting each word land like a gavel, "Jake Morrison resigns. Publicly. Effective immediately. No golden parachute, no consulting contract. He leaves with nothing but his smirk." The silence that followed was exquisite. At 9:03 the next morning, TechFlow's official social media accounts went dark for a full minute. No deflections, no vague "working on it" updates. Then, in one coordinated blast, the statement dropped everywhere. Website, Twitter, LinkedIn, press release. It was short, sharp, and exactly what I'd demanded. Amanda Torres and Kevin Walsh, reinstated immediately with full back pay. A paragraph outlining each of their contributions over the years. The kind of recognition you couldn't buy with any marketing budget. An admission, clear as crystal, that their termination had been a mistake. And there, in the final block of text, a scanned PDF of Morrison's resignation letter. 3 clipped paragraphs and his jagged signature at the bottom. No flowery language, no promises of supporting the company from afar. Just gone. But the tone. You could feel the teeth marks in every sentence. The humiliation wrapped in corporate politeness. I sat in my home office, my own mug warm between my hands. Better than any company mug they could have given me. And watched the feeds light up in real time. Clients reposted the statement with captions like, "About time." Industry bloggers quoted the resignation letter word for word. One popular tech commentator simply tweeted, "And that's how it's done," alongside a screenshot of my original portal message. At 9:08 I logged into my GoDaddy account. The domain sat there, steady and patient, waiting for me to make the final move. I clicked approve on the license renewal. By 9:10 the login portal was back online. 75,000 clients could once again access their dashboards, check their data, run their businesses. The outage was over. But the story was just getting bigger. News outlets pounced on the narrative. Long-time employee fired. Company loses portal access. CTO resigns in public defeat. The phrasing varied, but the message was locked. This wasn't just corporate humiliation. It was personal, stamped with Morrison's name for everyone to see. I didn't post anything. Didn't grant interviews. Didn't gloat on LinkedIn. I just closed my laptop, took a slow sip of coffee, and let the world connect the dots. Quiet victories cut the deepest. Leave the longest scars. By lunchtime, #TechFlowFails was trending. By dinner, my phone buzzed with friends sending screenshots from every corner of the internet. Former colleagues were messaging me privately with variations of, "Holy shit, Mitchell. You actually did it." And somewhere in that glass tower on South Lamar, David Chen was learning the final lesson. Firing me had cost them far more than keeping me ever would have. The portal was theirs again, sure. But the victory, that would always be mine. I'd spent 17 years being invisible, keeping their lights on while they took the credit. One forgotten domain registration, one moment of corporate arrogance, and I'd reminded them, and the entire tech world, that the people who build your empire are the same ones who can bring it down. Not with malice. Not with hacking or sabotage. Just with the truth that they'd never bothered to learn. Some threads, once pulled, unravel everything. The coffee tasted particularly good that morning.